So it was just a joke?
Oh, that's what you said? That's what they all say. You laughed. They laughed. The room laughed. But someone stopped laughing. You ever notice how the most dangerous words in the world are wrapped in a smile?
It's just a joke.
Relax. Don't be so sensitive. Funny thing about jokes, they don't stay jokes. They slip under the skin. They echo at 3 a.m. They replay in someone's head when the room is empty and the lights are off. You said it casually, carelessly, confident nobody would bleed from it. But words, oh, words are funny little weapons. They don't need permission to explode. And now they're having a moment. A breakdown, a spiral, a storm you helped start without even knowing it. See, we live in a world where cruelty wears comedy like makeup, where sarcasm hides insecurity, where we stab each other and call it banter. You thought it was harmless. You thought it was clever. But sometimes the joke isn't funny. It's the trigger. Tonight, we're not laughing. Tonight, we're pulling the mask off, because the line between humor and harm, it's thinner than your patience and sharper than your pride. So let me ask you something. When you said it as a jokey, did you ever stop to think who stopped smiling because of it? Let's talk about that. Humor is a fascinating disguise. It walks into a room smiling, shaking hands, lowering defenses. No one braces themselves when a joke is coming. No one puts on armor when the tone is playful and the crowd is already laughing. That's the trick. The sharpest blades don't always look like blades. Sometimes they look like punchlines. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in charm, dipped in sarcasm, polished with wit. And because everyone else is laughing, the target feels pressure to laugh too. That's how humor becomes camouflage. There's a difference between laughing with someone and laughing at someone, but that line is thinner than people admit. When a comment targets someone's appearance, intelligence, background, mistakes, or insecurities, and then hides behind, relax.
It's just a joke.
The humor stops being harmless. It becomes a shield that protects the speaker from accountability while leaving the receiver exposed. The words land, but the responsibility evaporates. After all, it was just comedy. What makes disguised words so powerful is timing. They're often delivered in social settings where silence feels heavier than participation. If the person who was targeted reacts seriously, they risk being labeled sensitive or dramatic, so they smile, they nod, they swallow it, and everyone else moves on, assuming no harm was done. But impact is not erased by laughter. A room full of chuckles doesn't cancel the sting felt by one person. Humor can also reveal hierarchy. Who gets to joke and who becomes the joke? Patterns matter. If the same person repeatedly becomes the punchline, the message becomes clear, even if it's never spoken directly. It reinforces roles. One powerful, one inferior. Over time, those little jokes accumulate. They shape perception. They shape confidence. They create internal narratives like, maybe I really am incompetent, maybe I really am annoying, maybe I deserve to be laughed at. The most dangerous part is plausibility. The speaker can always retreat. You misunderstood. I didn't mean it like that. You're overthinking. The joke becomes a loophole. Intent hides behind tone. But intent does not erase impact. The brain does not process humiliation differently just because it was delivered playfully. Emotional responses don't check for sarcasm before reacting. The body still tightens. The mind still replays. Disguised humor often thrives in environments where wit is valued over empathy. Quick comebacks earn applause. Savage remarks gain social currency. The sharper the line, the louder the reaction. In that culture, sensitivity becomes weakness and kindness becomes boring. So people escalate. They push boundaries to get bigger laughs. They normalize ridicule as entertainment. The line keeps shifting until cruelty feels casual. It's important to recognize that humor itself is not the enemy. Shared laughter can heal, connect, and strengthen relationships. The difference lies in direction and consent. When humor uplifts, includes, and respects boundaries, it builds trust. When it isolates, exposes vulnerabilities, or exploits insecurities, it erodes it. Disguised words test whether empathy is present. They reveal whether the goal was connection or dominance. Sometimes the person delivering the joke doesn't even realize the harm. They repeat patterns they grew up with. They mimic what gets approval. They assume resilience where there may be fragility. But unawareness doesn't neutralize consequence. Words linger. Tone echoes. A single sentence can replay in someone's head long after the laughter fades. When humor becomes a mask, it hides more than intention. It hides accountability, power dynamics, and the quiet discomfort of the one who didn't find it funny. The room may move on within seconds, but the memory doesn't always move with it. It sits. It settles. It becomes part of how someone sees themselves. And all of it started with something everyone insisted was harmless. There's a subtle violence in the phrase, "just kidding." It sounds harmless, almost affectionate, like a soft landing after a sharp fall. But what it often does is erase responsibility in real time. A comment is made. It lands awkwardly. The air shifts, and before anyone can fully react, the escape hatch opens. Relax. I'm just kidding. 4 words that attempt to rewind impact without actually removing it. The hidden damage begins in confusion. The person on the receiving end feels something sting, but the social script tells them not to. If it was a joke, then pain becomes inappropriate. If everyone else is laughing, then discomfort becomes a personal flaw, so they question themselves instead of the comment. Was I too sensitive? Did I misinterpret that? Should I toughen up? That internal negotiation is where the real damage starts. It shifts accountability inward. Just kidding creates emotional whiplash. A critical remark is delivered, then instantly reframed as humor. The brain has already registered the threat before the disclaimer arrives. The body reacts first. Tightened shoulders, forced smile, a quick laugh to blend in. Even if the speaker didn't intend cruelty, the nervous system doesn't wait for clarification. It reacts to tone, to context, to history. And once that reaction is triggered, it can't simply be undone by labeling the words a joke. Over time, repeated exposure to these disguised remarks builds an invisible weight. Each instance may seem small, but accumulation changes things. Self-confidence erodes quietly. A person who is frequently the target of playful insults begins to anticipate them. They prepare defenses. They rehearse responses. Social spaces that should feel safe begin to feel unpredictable. Laughter becomes something to brace for rather than enjoy. There's also a power dynamic embedded in the phrase. The person who says, "just kidding," controls the narrative. They decide when something is serious and when it isn't. If the listener reacts negatively, they risk being labeled dramatic. The speaker maintains innocence while subtly shifting blame. It becomes a game where one side holds the rules. The other side must either play along or risk social exclusion. The hidden damage extends beyond the immediate interaction. Words have a way of sticking to identity. A joke about intelligence can morph into self-doubt during a challenging task. A joke about appearance can echo in the mirror long after the moment has passed. A joke about capability can surface before taking a risk. What was framed as temporary humor can become a permanent internal narrative. In environments where sarcasm is normalized, people learn to tolerate more than they should. They adapt by numbing themselves. They laugh on cue. They pretend indifference. But suppression is not immunity. Emotional suppression often resurfaces in other ways: withdrawal, resentment, anxiety, or diminished trust. When someone feels repeatedly minimized under the cover of humor, connection weakens. Safety erodes. It's also important to recognize that not all jokes are malicious. Sometimes people use humor to mask their own insecurities. Sometimes they mirror communication styles they've been taught. But intention doesn't cancel effect. The phrase, "just kidding," often prioritizes the comfort of the speaker over the feelings of the listener. It protects ego rather than relationship. The real harm lies in invalidation. When someone expresses discomfort and is met with, "was only a joke," their emotional experience is dismissed. That dismissal teaches them to silence future reactions. It reinforces the idea that their feelings are inconvenient or exaggerated. Over time, this can create distance not just between people, but within the individual themselves. They begin to distrust their own emotional responses. Laughter can connect, but it can also conceal. "Just kidding" may sound like a harmless retreat, yet it often leaves behind residue, uncertainty, self-doubt, tension. The moment passes publicly, but privately it lingers, reshaping confidence and trust in ways that are rarely acknowledged out loud. Laughter is supposed to be light. It's supposed to lift the air, soften tension, bring people closer. But sometimes laughter changes temperature. It gets sharper, louder, focused. And when it does, it can leave a mark that no one else sees. The moment everyone laughs might be the exact moment one person feels exposed. There's a unique kind of isolation that happens when you're the only one not laughing at something said about you. The sound in the room grows, but inside, it goes quiet. You become hyper, aware of your posture, your expression, your breathing. Do you smile? Do you correct them? Do you pretend it doesn't matter? That split-second decision feels heavier than the joke itself, because whatever you choose will define how the room responds next. When laughter turns into a scar, it usually doesn't look dramatic. There's no obvious confrontation, no argument, just a small moment that passes quickly for everyone else. But the brain records it, especially if it touched something vulnerable: appearance, intelligence, background mistakes, family, identity. Humor has a way of slipping past defenses, and when it lands on something already sensitive, it digs deeper. The scar forms in repetition. One joke might sting. Several create a pattern. When someone becomes the regular punchline, their role in the group subtly shifts. They're no longer just participating, they're providing entertainment. And even if they laugh along, the laughter becomes armor. It hides discomfort to avoid further attention. Over time, that armor gets heavier. What makes these moments powerful is public exposure. Being laughed at in private feels different than being laughed at in front of others. Public laughter amplifies the feeling of judgment. It creates witnesses. It adds humiliation to hurt, even if the intention wasn't cruelty. The impact of being singled out in a group setting can linger long after the noise fades. A scar isn't just pain, it's memory. It's something healed but not forgotten. The next time a similar situation arises, the body remembers. The person might hesitate before speaking. They might hold back an idea. They might avoid drawing attention to themselves. Not because they lack confidence, but because they remember what it felt like when laughter followed their vulnerability. Sometimes the person who made the joke has no idea anything changed. They move on. They forget the line entirely. But the one who felt it doesn't forget as easily. Certain phrases replay unexpectedly. The tone, the timing, the reaction of others. Memory doesn't need permission to revisit moments that felt embarrassing or diminishing. There's also a subtle shift in trust. When laughter hurts, it creates distance. The target may become more guarded. They may filter their words more carefully. They may participate less freely. The room still laughs together, but something invisible has fractured. Safety isn't as solid as it once was. The scar can also influence self-perception. If a joke repeatedly highlights a flaw, real or exaggerated. It can begin to shape identity, even if the comment was meant lightly. Repeated emphasis can make it feel true. People start seeing themselves through the lens of those punchlines. That's the quiet power of social reinforcement. It's important to recognize that shared humor can be bonding when it's mutual and respectful. But when laughter isolates instead of includes, it transforms. It stops being connection and starts becoming commentary. The difference lies in consent and awareness. When someone laughs freely with you, it feels warm. When they laugh at you without considering how it lands, it can leave something permanent beneath the surface. Not all scars are visible. Some are carried in posture, in silence, in hesitation. They don't bleed. They don't demand attention. But they influence how someone shows up in the world. And sometimes, all it took to create one was a moment that everyone else dismissed as harmless fun. The tongue doesn't look dangerous. It doesn't flash like a blade or strike like a fist. It rests quietly behind teeth, small and ordinary. Yet it has the power to build someone up or dismantle them in seconds. A careless word can travel farther than its speaker ever intended. Once released, it cannot be retrieved, reshaped, or undone. It moves outward, enters someone else's mind, and begins working there without supervision. Carelessness is often subtle. It isn't always fueled by cruelty. Sometimes it's impatience. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's the desire to be clever in the moment. A quick remark, a sarcastic jab, an exaggerated critique, delivered without pause, without consideration of context or history. The speaker experiences it as fleeting. The listener may experience it as defining. Words carry weight beyond their syllables. They attach themselves to tone, facial expression, and timing. A dismissive laugh paired with a cutting comment can amplify impact. Even a single adjective can reshape how someone sees themselves. Lazy, dramatic, useless, embarrassing. When spoken repeatedly or publicly, labels begin to feel like verdicts rather than opinions. The power of a careless tongue lies in its reach. Physical actions are limited by proximity. Words travel through memory. They replay during quiet moments. They surface before important decisions. A person who has been told often enough that they are incapable may hesitate before trying something new. A person mocked for their voice may speak less. A person ridiculed for their ideas may stop offering them. The original comment may have lasted seconds, but its influence can stretch for years. Careless speech also shapes environments. In families, friend groups, workplaces, and classrooms, tone sets culture. If sarcasm and belittling become normalized, people adapt by shrinking or by hardening. Some withdraw to avoid becoming targets. Others learn to strike first to protect themselves. What begins as individual remarks can transform into collective behavior. Respect erodes gradually, almost invisibly. There's a misconception that strength is proven through sharpness. That dominance is displayed through verbal precision. That the ability to cut someone down quickly signals intelligence. But real strength often shows itself in restraint, in the pause before speaking, in the decision to choose clarity over cruelty, in the awareness that not every thought deserves a microphone. A careless tongue often hides behind excuses.
I was just being honest.
That's just how I talk. People need thicker skin. Honesty without empathy becomes aggression. Directness without awareness becomes damage. Communication is not just about truth. It's about delivery, timing, and intention. Words can be accurate and still harmful depending on how they are used. There's also the internal effect on the speaker. Habitual carelessness dulls empathy. The more someone disregards the impact of their words, the easier it becomes to continue doing so. Over time, this can weaken relationships. Trust depends on emotional safety. When people feel that anything they share might be turned into ammunition, vulnerability disappears. The tongue has creative power too. It can encourage, affirm, and validate. It can recognize effort. It can correct without humiliating. It can joke without degrading. The same mouth that wounds can also repair. But repair requires awareness. It requires listening when someone says a comment hurt, instead of dismissing their reaction. Speech is immediate, but consequences are not always visible right away. That delay can create the illusion of harmlessness. Just because damage isn't obvious doesn't mean it isn't unfolding internally. A single sentence may settle into someone's belief system quietly, influencing how they interpret future experiences. Every word is a choice. Some choices pass unnoticed. Others carve impressions that last. The power of a careless tongue is not dramatic or explosive. It is steady, cumulative, and often underestimated. It works in silence after the sound fades, shaping confidence, trust, and connection in ways that cannot easily be reversed. A mask is comfortable. It protects the face, hides intention, softens consequences. When humor becomes that mask, it allows someone to say what they might not dare to say directly. It creates distance between the speaker and the impact of their words. If the reaction is positive, they claim credit for being witty. If the reaction is negative, they retreat behind the disguise. It was just a joke. The mask absorbs the blame. Accountability begins where the mask comes off. It starts with recognizing that impact matters more than intention. Someone may not have meant to embarrass, belittle, or wound, but if harm occurred, that reality deserves acknowledgement. Dismissing it because the delivery was playful only deepens the injury. When a person hides behind humor to avoid responsibility, they prioritize their comfort over someone else's experience. Behind the mask, there is often insecurity. Sometimes jokes are used to test boundaries. Sometimes they are used to assert dominance without appearing aggressive. Sometimes they are a defense mechanism. Strike first before anyone can strike you. But understanding the motivation does not erase the outcome. Accountability requires courage to look beneath those motivations and ask why certain lines felt acceptable to cross. It can be uncomfortable to admit that something meant as light-hearted caused pain. Pride resists it. Ego flares up. The instinct is to defend, to explain, to minimize. Yet growth only happens in the space where defense is replaced with curiosity. Why did that comment hurt them? What pattern might I be repeating? Is there truth hidden in the criticism of my humor? These questions are not attacks, they are opportunities. Taking accountability does not mean abandoning humor altogether. It means refining it. It means learning the difference between inclusive laughter and isolating laughter. It means noticing who consistently becomes the punchline and asking whether that dynamic is fair. It means being attentive to body language, to forced smiles, to silence that follows a remark. Awareness transforms communication. An apology offered without excuses carries power. Not a conditional apology. I'm sorry if you felt hurt. But a clear acknowledgement. I'm sorry I hurt you. That sentence removes the mask. It accepts ownership. It shows respect for the other person's emotional reality. Accountability rebuilds trust that careless words may have weakened. There is also accountability within groups. Bystanders play a role in whether masked cruelty thrives. Laughter can reinforce behavior. Silence can validate it. Choosing not to participate in humor that targets someone unfairly shifts the atmosphere. Culture changes when people decide that wit does not need to come at someone else's expense. Behind every mask is a choice: to protect ego or protect relationship, protect reputation or protect respect. Humor can either strengthen bonds or strain them. The difference lies in whether the speaker is willing to examine their words honestly. Deflection is easy. Reflection is harder. Accountability also deepens self-awareness. It teaches restraint. It encourages empathy. It invites people to pause before speaking and consider the ripple effect of their words. Over time, that pause becomes habit. Communication becomes more intentional. Trust becomes more stable. When the mask stays on, growth stalls. Patterns repeat. Hurt accumulates quietly. But when it comes off, conversations become real. Boundaries become clearer. Laughter becomes safer because it is no longer weaponized. Accountability does not weaken humor, it strengthens connection. It ensures that when people laugh together, no one is silently carrying the weight of being the joke.